One of the things that I've always thought about as a marketer is that fundamentally, we're all in the intention business. We tend to overlook that, but that's pretty much what we're doing the entire time. Every time we send an email, every time we run a campaign for display, put stuff on social, what we're really trying to do is to gain someone's attention and then do something with it. The problem with this is it's really hard to get someone's attention. B2B kind of email click-through rates are typically about 2 to 3%. Display click-through rates are 0.07%. That's less than one person for every 1,000 impressions that you display actually click on something. So it's phenomenally hard to get someone's attention. And we're not just competing with our competitors, we're competing with everything that's going on in the world. I mean, I'm British, so Brexit is kind of front and center for me at the moment. If I'm a Brit, I'm slightly obsessed by that, let alone what I'm trying to do as a marketer to actually communicate with you. So if we've got someone's attention, here's what we typically do with it. We've given them the email, we've given them the display ad. That's really the content offer. They click on that, and then we typically take them to something like a landing page where we repeat that content offer, stick a form in their way, and then, and only then, do we actually give them the content asset. And that, what's wrong with that? Well, we call that kind of one and done. It's really not a very good experience. This is going to pick on VMware because I was on their site. This is what happened when I filled out that form. I went through to a hosted PDF. What's wrong with this? Well, it's a single asset dead end. If I do read it, there is no way for me to get more information without going back and having to navigate through what is actually quite a complicated site structure. Or I have to wait for VMware to email me again 10 a.m. next Thursday on the assumption that that's a good time for me. The click-to-content ratio, and this is 1-to-1, that's all I can do with that. That's as much content as I can get someone to consume with my hard-won click. It's not personalized. It looks and feels the same for me as it would for you, anyone that goes through to that content asset. And then finally, and most importantly, there are no engagement metrics. VMware doesn't know if I engage with this. They don't know if I read it. And that's a fundamental problem. To step back a little bit, this is a real issue because if we think about what we're actually trying to achieve with content, we use content. That's our primary asset as a marketer. It's not the clicks. It's not the form fills. It's actually the content asset. Can I get Bob to read and engage with it? Now, we use content as marketers to move prospects through the various stages of the funnel, from awareness through to education, consideration, and purchase, to MQL, to SAL, and hopefully ultimately to close one. Now, we're using the content. We're investing heavily in it. I think it's now 28% of the B2B marketer's average budget is spent on content production. Another 34% of that is then spent on the advertisement of that content. That's 64% of B2B marketing's budget is spent on production and then advertisement. But we don't really think about what happens on the delivery side of it, on the click. We've also got to move people through a volume of content. So the average B2B prospect engages with anywhere between 5 and 10 pieces of content, depending upon who you believe. Now, that's per persona. And when there's 6.4 people involved in the average buying decision, that's as much as 64, 68 content assets I've got to get someone to engage with or a company to engage with over the course of it. If we're only delivering one piece of content every time, that's 68 clicks that I've got to generate. And if it's really hard for me to generate the clicks, no wonder our buying cycle is so long. It takes 6 months to actually deliver the volume of content that someone needs. Let me ask you guys a question too. How do you actually research and buy anything that's a considered purchase? So one of my team made this. I'm not sure if they've ever bought a boat. I'd be quite surprised if they had, because we don't pay that well. But for all of these things, fundamentally, these are all considered purchases. One of our customers, Alex from Intel Security from McAfee, he always talks about kind of the way that he was historically delivering content would be like going to a car showroom every Saturday for 12 weeks and just finding out about one thing every time. This Saturday, I'm going to ask about the engine. Next Saturday, I'm going to come back and ask about the entertainment system. The following Saturday, I'm going to come back and find out the miles per gallon, etc. That is not how people research and buy. You do it in a concentrated fashion. So we deliver content as B2B marketers, typically kind of piecemeal, a piece of content every 2 weeks. Marketing automation platforms, bless them, they taught us to create this kind of nurture. Build a campaign, send a content asset, send a content offer rather, every 2 weeks at 10 a.m. on a Thursday, because that's a good time for 10,000 people. Try and deliver this content journey piecemeal is fundamentally not how people actually engage with content. So we do need to do a better job of accommodating natural behavior, of actually accommodating their need for more. People want to binge on content if they're engaged. Now, the other thing is, too, one of the wonderful things about B2B that I love is we tend to overlook the fact that B2B prospects also have a B2C life outside of their 9 to 5. So I was speaking to two very smart ladies who do marketing for a wire company. They sell industrial wire, over $1 billion in revenue. We were talking to them about kind of this and how to accommodate natural behavior. And they said, well, our prospects are typically 35 to 45-year-old men. I'm not sure if they'd go for that. I said, well, as a 35 to 45-year-old man, what do you think I do when I'm not at work? They said, we have no idea. I said, well, I follow sports. I follow a lot of sports. And so I'm on sites like ESPN and the like. ESPN gets that attention is their currency. They want to hold my attention. ESPN isn't happy if I just read one thing and then disappear. So if you think about the way that ESPN delivers content, they're aggregating. They're doing an awful lot of things to keep me engaged in session. And so fundamentally, we have all, as B2B, we already inherit that desire from our B2B prospects' B2C lives. They're used to engaging with content, backwards, in a kind of binging way. And Netflix brings this home in spades. People often ask me, kind of, what do we do? And sometimes I just say, well, we help you with your Netflix problem. Everyone goes, what's my Netflix problem? I say, well, did anyone watch House of Cards 1 episode a week? Not a chance. As soon as it's available to you, you binge watch. Engaged prospects in B2B will do exactly the same thing. Our data shows that Rockwell will speak to the value in that. So historically, we've tended to have a delivery model for content that looks and feels like Blockbuster ROP. It was one piece of content. Every 2 weeks, I had to go into the store, I had to take it out. The store was the same for you and me. They had no idea if I actually watched the video. There was certainly no personalization, no engagement metrics. Netflix, on the other hand, starts off the same for each of us, but then very quickly we personalize it, we make it our own. So my Netflix is now full of bad British comedy. That's not my Netflix, but hopefully yours isn't. So at its core, we have to fix content delivery. Serious Decisions reports that 94% of marketing qualified leads don't close. They don't turn into revenue. That is not a good thing for B2B marketers. 94% of our efforts don't impact revenue at all. And I think the fundamental reason behind that is that they're not queued. They're not qualified. There is no way that when we hand somebody over to sales, if we don't know that they're actually engaged with the content, the sales is in a position to actually have an intelligent conversation with them. So how do we do this? When I think about kind of content delivery, I think about kind of our job as B2B marketers as essentially a bit like matchmaking. How do we actually match the prospect with the content that they need? And how do we do it in a way that really works with them? So B2B prospect, ready to settle down, would like to meet long and short form content for educational experiences and fun times. Format and age are important, but must be responsive. That's fundamentally what we're trying to do. We're trying to deliver content to our prospects in a way in which works for them. Relevant content. So fundamentally, across all of our channels, we've really focused on the channels. We've focused on email, we've focused on website, display, social. But if we don't have an intelligent content delivery layer in our kind of MarTech stack, then we're going to be wasting an awful lot of these clicks. That intelligent content layer needs to be working with your marketing automation platform, with the database, ultimately needs to be working with CRM. It needs to use first and third-party data, and fundamentally it needs to then feed back into email. If Bob has already engaged with 3 or 4 content assets, let's accelerate him through the nurture. We don't need to send him emails 2 and 3 because he's already engaged with that stuff. Let's move into email 4. So what is intelligent content delivery? To my mind, there are 2 core parts to it. Firstly, we have to accommodate next best content asset in session. The in session is really important. We've done the hard work of getting Bob to click on something. How do we actually allow Bob to binge on the right content while we have his attention? Essentially, how do we let Bob self-nurture? How do we let him accelerate? The second thing is that we have to actually track Bob's engagement. We need to generate real content engagement analytics. We have to be able to answer the question, did Bob consume our marketing? Is he now more educated so that he can actually go on to the next stage of our marketing campaign? And we need to then start to look at what was the quality of the click that we generated. How does this differ by channel, etc. So let's look at both of these in a little more detail. We need in-session content sequencing. Let me show you what that looks like. I showed you a static image, like a one-and-done experience from VMware earlier. This is a far more intelligent way to deliver that same PDF. And clicking through to it, but on the left-hand side, you can see that there is related content available related to that content asset. I can get to it by either going through the left-hand side, through the topic sidebar, or through the right with the kind of promoter. Now, this is an in-session bingeable experience. As a result, I'm changing that click-to-content ratio from 1-to-1 to 1-to-many. If I've just paid $15 for a display ad, the return on that $15 is now far higher. These experiences should be able to be manually curated, i.e., I as the marketer can define what this content is, or we should be able to allow artificial intelligence, machine learning algorithms and the like, to dynamically create this based upon factors such as the relationship between this content asset and the other ones on the left-hand side, and looking at historic engagement. How have people engaged with this? And the fourth thing, and the most important thing probably, is actually the generation of real engagement metrics. Does Bob actually read this white paper? What does he then go on to engage with next? What is Bob actually interested in as a result? So how do you do in-session content sequencing? Well, you can develop it in-house. That is somewhat tough. Our own VP of marketing joined us because she used to run demand generation at Eloqua. And she was trying to do this, but she did it with 500 landing pages, trying to programmatically sequence people through them. It was a right bugger's muddle, as we would say in the UK. Or you can buy in the technology. I have a vested interest in that, obviously. And then secondly, you can do it as manually curated or dynamically created, powered by AI. Now, manually created is great because sometimes, if it's a member of your known database, you know what story to tell them. If you're already nurturing them via an email thing, that story is already implicit in that nurture. So targeted storytelling versus related content. How do I enable anonymous prospects to start to actually discover the right content that they need before they convert? So we always like to draw the distinction. I'm a big fan of kind of analogies. You can do something that looks and feels more like a curated iTunes playlist. My daughter just turned 9, bless her, and she had a birthday party with an awful lot of 8- and 9-year-old girls. There was no way that I was going to hit play on my iTunes and just let it shuffle, because there were some things on there that they definitely shouldn't be listening to. So I curated a playlist because I knew my audience and I knew what mood and story I wanted to tell to them. Whereas on the other hand, if I didn't know who they were, then I'm into the realm of kind of the anonymous kind of Netflix-esque content discovery. Because of your interest in House of Cards, you really should watch The Wire. So the manual side of it is pretty straightforward. Let's focus more on the dynamically created content recommendations. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm a big sports fan. So on my mobile recently, I was reading on The Guardian, will Warren Gatland's pragmatic tactics, oh, I'm really ingrained, pragmatic tactics suit the Lions, England's core? You guys have no idea what that means. It's all something to do with rugby. But as a result, I did not expect, and I blacked out their names to protect the innocent, at the bottom of this page, what I got recommended was 3 young women turned down largest deal in Dragon Den history. Boy rescued this creature from side work. What it grew into left him gasping. The 3 women who turned down 30 million, and 31 jaw-dropping WNBA players. Completely out of context. It has nothing to do with me. I'm pretty certain they think I'm female for starters, because they're all to do with 3 out of the 4 of them with women. And this really kind of, I was left thinking, why, Jeb, why? Why on earth would you have your stock photo with that little, whatever that thing is, your phone case on the side? This is not a good content recommendation experience at all. And at the heart of that is because they fail on this. This is what the intelligent content delivery data model looks like. It's actually pretty straightforward. What do I know about the person? What do I know about the content? How do they engage? That failed both of those tests miserably. It had nothing to do with who I was. It had nothing to do with the context of I was reading about rugby. Where was the rugby-related content in that recommendation? And as a result, their engagement was a big fat 0. So this model underpins what we're trying to basically do with AI. And one of the things that we'll explore in a little bit is how do I generate the data to actually make this model actually relevant in the first place?